Much Israeli and Palestinian officials sat down last night for the first time in 3 years in an effort to begin negotiations to end long-time hostilities. Their last attempt ended almost as soon as it began. So, can they stay at the table this time long enough to make a change? Joining us now is David Weinberg, Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thanks for coming in. Good to have you here.
Thank you for having me today. So, Secretary of State Kerry spent 6 visits to the region over the last 4 months just to try and get these parties back together. And now he's had a small success by kicking off talks again yesterday. He also has gotten the parties to agree to talk for 9 months this time instead of just several weeks.
Right.
However, there are a lot of gaps between these parties, and it's difficult to see them bridging them anytime soon.
Do we have any reason to be optimistic? We're showing Netanyahu there, and, there was the release of these 100 or so Palestinian prisoners. As he said, I know some aren't going to be happy about this, but sometimes you have to make the tough decisions. Is that kind of a show of good faith, and is that reason to bring some optimism to the talks?
Well, it was certainly an act of statesmanship on his part. I mean, this was a gut-wrenching decision to release 104 prisoners, most of whom are terrorists with blood on their hands. It was a concession that his Palestinian partners had wanted for mainly domestic reasons, and the fact that he was able to get it through his cabinet was really significant and showed that he's not reluctant to pull out some stops to really get to these talks.
You mentioned they've agreed to talk for 9 months now, but is that a firm commitment? I mean, 2 months into it, could all the parties say, well, this is useless and walk away?
No, you're absolutely right. It's not an ironclad commitment, especially because if you look at how the Palestinian prisoner release was structured, the Israelis agreed to release 104 prisoners, but they said, you know what, we're going to do this in phases. We're going to release them probably in 4 different stages in order to make sure that things are working well on the other side. So there is a little bit of skepticism there.
All right, tell us what's at stake, because I assume that, it's all the big issues that have still been there. That's what they still have to deal with.
Yeah, there are enormous gaps between the parties on refugees, on territory, on security,
settlements,
and they are not really very close together. We've seen this movie before. We also know how it ends, and there is a significant chance of violence happening if negotiations fail. So one of the challenges for leaders on all sides is going to be to figure out, if they don't think they're going to close the gaps on these core issues, preparing for a soft landing so we don't see another intifada.
Talk to me about the significance of naming former U.S. Ambassador Martin Indyk to help negotiate these talks. What do we know about him? So,
I know Martin personally. I interviewed him for my forthcoming book. There was probably a little bit of heartburn in the Israeli government when he was selected. There was also probably some concern on the Palestinian side. That having been said, he knows these issues like the back of his hand. He's shown that he can work with the individuals and the parties on both sides in the past, so the challenge moving forward is to see if he can really retain their trust.
There are some who would say if there's a little bit of heartburn on both sides, then he's probably the right choice for it, because it's not someone who will make either side completely happy.
That's certainly one view.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about John Kerry's role, because it's interesting. I was saying not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, that he seems to be very low-key, kind of under the radar. Secretary of State Clinton she was just out there a lot, and he has been flying a little bit under the radar. But this is a radar. This is a pretty big feather in his cap, it seems. We don't know what will come of it, but it's pretty substantive to at least get them to the table, wouldn't you say?
Well, he certainly has a very different style from Secretary of State Clinton. He has kept most of the details of these talks hidden behind closed doors. And we actually heard the Israeli negotiators say in the last 24 hours that they've agreed to a code of silence in their talks. So even though this is a significant step forward, we're going to see most of these talks at the beginning focus on substance, not on substance, but really on the frameworks for the talks. And we're not even going to see a lot of details, in part because of Kerry's style, in part because it's tough to get them to talk about sensitive issues in public and to do it seriously.
Do you have some optimism about this, or?
I have a little bit of optimism, but I wouldn't hold my breath.
All right. All right. We'll see what comes of it. David Weinberg, Senior Fellow with the Foundation for Defense of Democracy. Thanks for coming in. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Good morning.
We'll see you again.